Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Omindu Rathnaweera. I'm the head of product and architecture for WSO2 Identity and Access Management Suite. I've been there with the product entirety of my software engineering career. I was living, breathing identity and access management. So today, the area of focus for my presentation is about CIAM, or rather Customer Identity and Access Management. Specifically, so I'm going to speak about building secure consumer applications, or building secure experiences for your consumer applications, not just focusing about the secure aspect, but the convenience aspect of it as well. So let's quickly, okay, all right. So when a customer or a prospect first started engaging with your business, it does not take a lot of time for them to build a perception on your digital products or digital brands, right? So the experience they get, will they get a more secure, seamless, welcoming experience, or will it be an experience with a lot of hardships, roadblocks, mistrust, and frustration? So for me, CIAM sits as the crossroad of this. So if done right, CIAM can be an enabler which builds trust, security, engagement, and loyalty. If not done right, it could lead to customers ending up leaving your platform. So this is why I position this as customer IAM is a make or break experience. It's not just a layer that sits between your customer and your application. It's a vehicle that brings the first experience, that first needed experience that been brought to the customers of your business. So here's the challenge. So over the years, we have realized that there's no universal formula that will help us to figure out what's the ideal experience or the customer journey for your business, right? So we take one organization. What works for a particular organization will not work for another organization. Sorry, should I go back? So sorry about that. So even within an organization, a particular experience will work for one set of users, but it will not work for another segment of users. So there's really no one-size-fits solution to come up with these experiences. So let's have a look at some considerations that you have to look in when building these customer journeys. So these are very high-level considerations. So later on, we'll dive a bit deeper on how to make this more concrete in your customer IAM journeys. So first of all, consider the context. So the context means the product you're selling, the business you are at, the customer demography, the region, and various other factors. So if I take a simple example, take something like social login, right? So what works for a customer base in the United States will definitely not work for a user base in China. They use different methodologies for doing things like social login. They use different platforms for engagement. So context is an important thing. So streamlining the journey, that's also a key thing. So make the hops as short as possible. So don't be a barrier. Make your CIAM journeys barrier between your user getting from point A to B. Also make sure that these experiences are streamlined across all your different channels, be it mobile, web, a POS system, or a kiosk. So yes, adjusting based on risk is another important thing. So have a sense on what are the high-risk engagement versus low-risk engagement. So chances are your first login experience at the point where the user logs in, it does not need necessarily to carry a military-grade security, right? You might need at a later point, but you have the flexibility and luxury with the modern identity and access management techniques to get that necessary level of assurance at a later stage of the journey, but you don't have to hinder the user's initial experience by bombarding them with different security mechanisms at the beginning of their journey. So having the agility is another important aspect, because as I mentioned, there's no one-size-fits solution for that. So in order to figure out what works well for you, you'll have to test hypotheses, test out, figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So that having that agility, being able to quickly test out things is going to be very important when figuring out the required CIAM journeys for a customer. So along with that, having proper visibility is key, because you don't want to fly blind. You need to figure out what are the things that works, where my users are getting dropped out of, and what can I make to make that journeys more secure and seamless for there's more conversion, engagement, and loyalty. Right. So all this consideration has to be done while maintaining this delicate balance between security and convenience. So that's essentially we wanted to go where enable identity architects, developers to build these secure, seamless journeys without making it a burden to the user. Right. So let's dive in a bit more into detail. So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to talk a bit more detail on these foundational IAM touchpoints. So why I picked these three is, as a digital product consumer, you can probably relate with all these three. So you start with registration. This is the first touch point of your user before doing anything meaningful with your business. So you have to make sure it's seamless and hassle-free as much as possible. Then the login aspect comes in, where this is going to be an everyday interaction in most cases for your users of your platform. So you have to make it, again, a very smooth experience without making them feel like it's a cumbersome, like a tireful experience. The recovery, so this is where users are already in a stressful situation. Right? They wanted to get in your account, but they really are being blocked with the lack of access to their credentials. So we have to also make sure that we provide the necessary guidance to users. And on the same time, these recovery flows are the areas that are getting mostly targeted by the malicious actors. So account takeover attacks typically triggered or are targeted through these recovery flows. So we have to make it a lot more harder for the malicious actors in order to go through these flows without making it difficult for the intended users to recover their accounts. Right. So let's start with one of the first things, so registration. So if you look at this account creation experience, does it resonate or reflect welcoming experience? For me, probably not. So what are the problems you see? You have a lot of things that are being collected there, and user doesn't know why these things are getting collected. And on top of that, the UX aspect of it is not that good. So probably, if you are building something, you will, in this day and age, you will not probably use this kind of a technique or this kind of approach to build your registration experiences. So first of all, minimize data collection when it comes to your login experience. So collect absolute minimum data. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to need more data about the user at some point in your journeys. But for these cases, it does not necessarily require to collect all the entirety of that information at the login page. Use progressive profiling technique where you use then and there approach to collect these data. So this progressive profile creation enrichment can be engaged at several locations. First and foremost, it could be a subsequent login. So when you're doing continuously access the system, you can pop in to get some information about the user, or when they're using or doing a privilege action on your system, maybe downloading something or getting something delivered. So you need address, mobile, that kind of thing. So at that point, you get that information to your system and use it in subsequent interactions. So if you pay a bit close attention to this the animation, you have this two variations of the registration experience. So the simpler one, it's almost can also qualify it as a sign-in page, where the other one is a bit more lengthy. So if I'm a user, I personally prefer the more simpler approach, where it lets me get from being an unregistered user to registration user within a minimum time of minimum possible time. Consent then is a very important factor. So this consent collection is one of the interactions that you get to build trust between you and your customers. So make sure you clearly communicate the intent while you're collecting this data, and get explicit consent from the user before storing their system, as well as sharing it with third parties if you must. One minor couple of details I want to share when you're building registration experience. If you're collecting some amount of data, make sure these UX or the UIs that are compliant with the standard approaches, such as indicating that this is capable of, this is okay to be autofill, right? So these smaller things goes a long way when you're designing this experience. The other aspect is password policies. So a lot of users use these built-in password generators, password walls in their system. So often these tools generate passwords on behalf of you. So try to match these policies with whatever the policies provided by these things. So even though you collect some amount of data from the user, it makes even easier for the users to quickly fill out and get through this journey. So the next one, of course, if you're a consumer-facing business, social sign-in should be your bread and butter. So I'm not going to go into details, but what I want to highlight is now the modern approaches of social sign-in has evolved from the traditional experiences we had, where we click and we get redirected to some place and then you come back to the application. But now companies like Google have taken this approach called, like, if you're familiar with one-tap experience, if you go to websites like Medium, or if you're a Ascario customer, if you go to our console, you will get this one-tap experience, where without having to leave the application, you will be able to authenticate with your social IDP then and there. So this is a much more convenient experience for users. So if you are embedding social login or social accounts to your applications, use these techniques. On the same line, Apple also have a similar experience if you're logging on an Apple device with your Apple ID. So they have streamlined that experience so much so that it's just a matter of click, you can get through it. So again, when you're selecting this provider, be mindful about the demography or the region. And if you're doing a dev-based product, use things like GitHub to get your users onboarded. And if you're a professional product, LinkedIn. If it's a regional thing, use these regional methods, like if it's China, WeChat, VK, or something like that. And also consider about enabling login or accessing, registering to this system through government issues ID. So we'll talk about this a bit later as well. So now there's a massive trend where governments are heading towards this issuing digital verifiable identities. So enabling this kind of registration to application potentially expose or like enables your application to the entire population of the country. So consider these things when you are building this experience. Right. Credentials beyond password. So most experiences you see when it comes to registration, it's mostly bound to passwords. Now you can see the trend coming up where, in addition to passwords, you support passwordless approaches as well. So be it passkeys, magic links, SMS OTP. So you can use these techniques so users don't have to be bound to these traditional methods or traditional credentials. So another important aspect is protecting your experiences against automated abuse and bots. So this is a common occurrence when it comes to registration experience. It's generally an open endpoint, so anyone can go and try to create bogus accounts if you are not doing proper verification, etc. So a very famous way of doing it is CAPTCHA. Basically, you have variety of ways of variety of providers that provide different experiences with CAPTCHA. So Google leading, and then we have Cloudflare, Turnstile, which came into picture very recently, but getting adopted well, and HCAPTCHA and those kind of things. So when you're using also CAPTCHA, it's used newer version of this. They support less intrusive ways of collecting these things, like silent or invisible passive capture, where users don't have to do much when it comes to registering. But be mindful, like when you're setting proper security settings, there's a when it comes to capture, at least recapture at least, there's a very fine margin between you don't feel like you're using capture versus getting stuck on endless loops of trying to select fire hydrants or taxis or motorcycles. So, so balance it out. Then if you want more advanced protections against bots frauds, you can integrate with these proprietary solutions where they do, they provide fraud and bot detection as service. So you can utilize these kind of things in your system. So you can utilize things like IP and device fingerprinting, whether they have routed devices. So then you can take additional measures or verifications before letting the users into the system. So yeah, logging in. So this is almost day-to-day activity for us tech folks. This looks very convenient, but not for the right audience, right? So, so let's have a look what techniques that you can use when securing your logging journeys, making it more seamless and simpler and secure for your customers. So first of all, allow multiple modes of, so it goes without saying, providing the capability to enroll MFA should be a basic capability that you provide from your platform. So some form of MFA is better than not having any sort of MFA. So give users options to enroll multiple types of things. So based on the user, it will depend. Some like to have passkeys. Some may like to have passkeys, but they don't have. But they want to engage different type of authentication factor. Could be a TOTP, push authentication based, so on and so forth. And there could be situations that where multi-factor authentication is enabled, but the user does not have the necessary means to provide that factor. For example, let's say you're logging in from your laptop, but your mobile device is doesn't have the, it's turned off, and you don't get the SMS code. So how do you help users to get through these situations? So backup code is a good strategy. So where you allow users to download a bunch of one-time use passcodes. You generally, when you can go and download about 10 of these. And in these contingency situations, you can go ahead and use these backup codes. Yeah, adaptive MFA. So this is a key driver of like key technique that you can use to get rid of MFA fatigue, right? So if you have a static MFA flow, which always do the same set of things, you collect username, collect OTP, collect username, collect OTP. That's not going to scale well. So at some point, users are going to feel the strain of it, or strain of having to do OTPs or different types of MFA in the system. So using adaptive authentication or adaptive MFA techniques is a good way of tackling this problem. For example, in this illustration, so if a user is coming repetitively from the same device, there's a reasonable level of assurance that you can, there's a reasonable level of guarantee that you can say that this is the same user. So in that cases, you don't have to necessarily prompt MFA and let the user log in with their preferred first factor. And make sure if there are some suspicious activities going behind, you can then recognize that and prompt for second factor. So especially for suspicious cases, and as well as for the high impact cases, you can use these adaptive MFA techniques. Yeah. Progressive credential enrollment. So this is, again, you don't see much happening, but in recent past, I have seen with the introduction of passkeys, you've seen the platforms adopting these techniques. So progressive enrollment of credentials is a very good way of encouraging customers to enroll a second factor, right? So you can promote better MFA or login options like passwordless, so passkeys through these progressive enroll techniques. But be mindful when you give these capabilities, because not all users have access to these capabilities like passkey. So if you have a older device, probably the chances are you don't have passkey support. So it doesn't really make sense for them to get prompted to enroll for passkeys. So, but the technology supports detecting this beforehand. So if someone is coming from a device which doesn't have this support, you can encourage them to use a different method or a do not prompt for enrollment at all. All right, account linking. Oh, this is again a convenience that you can provide. So if you have multiple ways of onboarding, so I as a user could sign up to the system with my username password, but later on during sign-in process, I might use my Google credential. So, sorry. Okay, sorry. So I might use Google or something to log in. So at that point, I don't necessarily need to have an entire new account, right? So if the provided, or if I'm logging into my same email ID, which I provided during my initial login, so initial registration, we can do the matching and give the option to the user to link these accounts. And please make a note that when you're linking these kind of accounts, make sure you verify both factors. If you're logging with social login, make sure that you verify against the local account as well, and without making it an account takeover situation. Right. So moving on. Okay. So passive authentication is another good advanced technique that you can use without giving an extra burden to the user. So passive. You typically use techniques like behavioral biometrics when it comes to these things. So behavioral biometrics typically have things like typing behavior-based pattern recognition. So you can identify the user based on how they type or how they swipe their mobile touch screen. So these are very good approaches of getting additional assurance. For example, let's say I have typing behavioral biometrics enroll. While I type my password, I can passively collect information about my typing pattern, verify it against the systems which provide these capabilities in addition to the username password, and get some additional assurance from these systems whether, okay, for this user, this typing pattern matches for 90% or 85%. So the system or identity system can decide whether to prompt MFA or not based on these assurance levels. Right. So recovery. This is again a very common occurrence. I mean, I'm sure everyone has gone through these things. So this is a silly example, but in my lifetime, I had more than 2-3 times happen to me where I actually very conveniently delivered my actual password to my email account. So, which is obviously not a good thing, but it happens. So, so there are a lot of considerations that we can put into when implementing recovery flows to your application. First and foremost, make it a self-service operation. It goes without saying, because the user will not have patience or time to wait until one of your support agents come online and help them to get on board with their account. So make it self-service, and avoid using knowledge-based factor as a sole factor for recovering your account. So just, for example, take things like challenge questions. You do not make that challenge question as a sole factor to recover that password, rather account. So it is fine to combine that with a different factor, but not as a sole factor. So you can use techniques like OTPs, push notifications to get additional assurance before letting the users to reset their passwords. And also, for high-risk scenarios, you can employ techniques as identity verification, where you let the users verify themselves in a self-service manner by letting them scan their passport, driving license, along with some level of liveness detection. You can support these self-service capabilities and get some additional assurance before you let them reset their account. So also, Passwords are not the only thing that you recover. They are, with the introduction of different other methods of login, you can incorporate. You have to incorporate different or support different ways of recovering credentials. It could be pass keys or TOTP. So typically, you can have similar flows engaged when giving them the capability to recover their credentials. And also, there are certain cases you have to support username recovery as well. If your login ID is not something like a user email or something, it could be forgotten by the user. So then you have to employ mechanisms for them to recover that account. So on the similar line of resetting your credentials, one other important thing is about letting the user update certain types of attributes, right? So typically as a platform, you will support or let your users update certain attributes. Could be your name, email, etc. But when it comes to scenarios where your user updating your things like mobile number or an email address, which could have been used as a second factor in your login page. So you have to be extra cautious when you let these things be updated by the end user. So make sure that it not lead to an account takeover situation. So if you feel like it's something that needs additional verification, you can employ different techniques to get that assurance. OK, so I'll quickly run this through. These are not rocket science, actually. So measuring the success of your CIAM journeys is important. So there are different customer experience matrices and operational matrices that you can use, and some things advanced like NPS scoring, CSATs, that you can use to verify whether your CIAM journeys are working well, where the users are getting dropped on, what you can more do to make sure that users are not getting stuck in or getting abandoned at the login or registration flows. So use these techniques, matrices, to build out and streamline your IAM journeys. Right, so I want to quickly touch base on thinking about CIAM just more than access management. So Geetika went a lot more detail into why the personalization is needed. We identify the personalization is something that goes hand in hand with the user identity. So businesses are moving more and more towards providing personalized experiences due to the competitive nature of this. There's the abundance of services with similar capabilities, price points, but personalization becomes one key differentiator when it comes to a user picking one service against another, right? So as a vehicle which identifies the user, it's natural to support the capability for us to build these user profiles so that your developers will be able to build this personalized experience with the help of your CIAM platform. So we are going to release a bunch of capabilities which falls around these, which supports our personalization narrative. First and foremost, it's going to be heavily developer-driven. So developers can bring personalization to their application by themselves. So things like anonymous account management, anonymous to permanent profile linking, and privacy-aware data collection, management, and sharing, and SDKs that will help easily integrate with the application to update or retrieve data about these users. Then we want to go further a bit more and use our wider platform, our integration platform, etc., to do more deeper integrations with different platforms, so you can filter or fetch more data and build that holistic view of your end customer. So if you drop by WSO2 bar, you can see a real demo which showcases what we are bringing in with this feature. Yeah, so you should be able to see in about 2-3 weeks max in Ascardio, and we are targeting to release these on-prem by the first quarter of 2026, hopefully. Yeah, so a few final thoughts. So CIAM is not just about access management, it's much more. You have user, UX, you have personalization. So it's a combined entity. CIAM is becoming more and more, becoming a vehicle which goes beyond access management. So, and also, as I mentioned, design journeys that fits your business, not someone else's business. So use context, demographies, regions, and all this data when it comes to crafting these journeys. And make sure you have visibility in your CIAM journey so you can get a good sense of what works and what doesn't. So make it secure, make it seamless, and make it forgettable. So keep out on lookout of new trends, right? So for example, AI. So AI will definitely going to bring a lot of new ways of building these smart identity journeys with the data available. And also look at things like these verifiable credentials, government digital IDs that you can incorporate with your business applications. And also, so if you go through this entire presentation, you probably get the sense that building out these different strategies into application is going to take a lot of work. So that's where we can help. So the CIAM products are specialized for you to help building these seamless, secure journeys without you having to touch your application code at all. So let us help you to implement these seamless, secure journeys into your login registration CIAM journeys. So I'll be sticking around. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take.